today to talk to you about imposter syndrome, what it is, why it's here at all, what causes it, and steps you can take to overcome it. Because it's something that can derail you in the midst of something really important that's happening. So I want to just give a quick shout out to Women in Data. Thank you again for putting this together, this symposium, and to anchor us all in this notion that empowered women empower other women. So I use this as the framework for us to all learn from each other, learn together. So this is not a one-sided me telling you. I do want to hear from you. So please, by all means, reach out to me in the chat, speak up, or on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you as well. So I want to share first just kind of a grounding moment of what is imposter syndrome? What does it look like? So a story from my own experience. I had previously really just been a builder, and now I was forced to be in the front of a classroom for a sales boot camp. Now, if you've never attended a sales boot camp, don't worry. It really just is a classroom experience. But after being behind the scenes the whole time, I kind of was pushed center stage to teach some of the modules and facilitate the whole learning experience and get all of these sales guys, I was thinking of them as like rowdy teenagers to get them to all pay attention. And I was really nervous. Oh my goodness. So here is a little snapshot of me. Imagine a sweaty, shaking mess where I was trying to keep it together and deliver my presentation with a semblance of confidence. It was not cute, right? You can imagine. I sort of looked like I had been running around the parking lot in a few circles before starting this day. So after having this experience, this was a big deal for me at the time. After having this experience of feeling so shocked and unstable about what had just happened to me and how I totally lost my cool, I went looking for what was it that I was experiencing and how could I make sure that I didn't show up like a sweaty mess again. I had already taken public speaking classes. I had been on stage many times before as a soloist in band and a dancer and some other things. But for some reason, this particular area, I just was feeling so incredibly nervous. So I went looking, and the first thing I found was a quote from one of my favorite authors. I just love Maya Angelou. I really looked up to her. I think of her as one of the sort of superstars of the female experience. And if you're unfamiliar with any of her works, I really strongly recommend reading Still I Rise or Phenomenal Woman. Well, I found this quote from her, kind of describing almost exactly what I was feeling, but thinking to myself, if she can feel it, if the incredible Maya Angelou has this feeling, who's accomplished so many amazing, incredible, wonderful things in her very long life, if she feels this way sometimes, then number one, I'm not crazy. And number two, this must be not just an isolated experience. It must be something a little bit more universal. So this idea of I'm actually imposter. This is what you think about me isn't true. What you think about me isn't real. I don't deserve any of this. So if that is resonating with you, believe me, this is the presentation for you. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of the research first, because I'm a social scientist, so it's a little thing you should know about me. My degrees are in anthropology, but I'm a social scientist by nature. I always want to look to social science to help us uncover why we do the things that we do. And as humans, this is complex. It's not straightforward. It's not a hard science. It's a soft science, but we're constantly learning. So I want to go back to the beginning of this. And no surprise, it was coined by two women. Originally, they called it imposter phenomenon. Now, Dr. Pauline Rose Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes did research, and what they found was that despite outstanding professional and academic accomplishments, women who experience this feeling of imposter syndrome are believing that they're just not that bright and that they've got everyone fooled. And what was more interesting after reading this particular paper is that I saw not just myself, but my sisters in this research. So Dr. Imes and Dr. Clance defined what they called the two archetypes of imposter phenomenon feeling or experiencing women. The first archetype is the girl in childhood who's told she's perfect. She can do anything and everything she does is amazing. She can do no wrong. She is the star. And the second one was very often described as maybe you're not like your sister, or you're not like your cousin, or you're not like your brother, or you're not like, but you're really social, and that's wonderful about you, right? It's not that parents are intending to cause harm, and this doesn't always come from parents. Sometimes this comes from other relatives or extended child's experience, but that leads to those two archetypes. Now, I just had to laugh because let me show you. These are my sisters and I. So here I am in the middle. On our right here on screen is my oldest sister, and she was the academic star straight out of the gate. This girl could get no grade less than an A-. She was always top of her class. She took so many college level courses while still in high school that she started at UC Berkeley as a second semester sophomore, right? So incredible academic talent, right? And then sister number two here on our left on the screen, she was the athletic star. So she was on track to be Olympic level softball player until she got injured. And she then took up volleyball and was an all-state in volleyball, right? So she had just incredible talents in athletics. And then number three is me. And guess what they called me? The social one. Oh, it was kind of perfect, right? So reading this, I thought, okay, they got it down. They got it figured out. So my social skills I developed because that's where I could be different. I could be different in terms of my music. I could be different in terms of art. And that's how I could shine in those arenas. But it also gave me a sense of being less than the other two, because somehow or another, academic and athletic stars were more visible. They were more obvious. They were more socially acceptable than being the nerdy musician that I was, right? So even though I had a lot of friends and we had lots of fun and I had, so many good memories, I still always had this sense of somehow or other I just wasn't good enough. But I do want to say this. Subsequent research has shown that imposter syndrome is not limited to just women, and it's not limited really to overachievers either. Anyone can experience imposter syndrome. It just happens to show up most frequently in high achievers, regardless of gender. So there's another aspect that's really important here about child psychology that we need to understand in order to understand how we actually overcome and manage this as an adult. So we're all born with a range of personality traits, a range of possible identities, if you will. The academic one, the athletic one, the social one. It's not that any of us are just one of those things. In fact, we're born with capabilities of being probably all of those things in most cases, right? So it's how you choose to reinforce your sense of self as a child that becomes your dominant personality, right? Your dominant personality is what develops in the first sort of 5-6 years of life. And what they also find in child development psychology is that you're going to choose the most dominant personality based on when you get the most love, the most affection, the most attention, the most positive reinforcement. So critically, what this does is manifest this notion that we put on a mask, if you will. Since we're born with a range of possible identities, when we start to settle into the one that's the most dominant, we can actually choose to put on a different mask in different company. So think about who you are at work might be different than who you are with your significant other alone, or who you are with your children, or who you are with your parents, right? We choose to put on different parts of ourselves, different masks, if you will, or express different parts of our identities based on the situation that we're in. Now, this can be really positive, a very highly adaptive response to challenging situations, right? It can be a way of protecting yourself. It can be a way of getting more attention and more love, right? Those are positive things. Where it can get negative, though, is if that identity becomes the only way that you can cope. It becomes the way to hide. It becomes the way to protect yourself. And that sort of inward-facing, fear-based identity is actually really caustic. And so I want to just make one really critical point here to all of you mothers out there. There's no such thing as a child raised without masks. There's nothing you can do to stop them from donning a particular part of themselves as being the most dominant part of their identity. It's totally normal and natural. Really, what we need as adults is managing the skill set of showing up as our most authentic self, as our truest self, our most confident self, the self that we love the most, and the self that we believe others will love as well, right? So combining those is really important here. So self-awareness is the most important tool in your toolkit to help you understand yourself in order to overcome the imposter syndrome, right? So if you take nothing else away from this talk, I want you to think about self-awareness. Now, I mean this as a methodology. I don't mean this as like the let's get together in a drum circle and talk about ourselves. I do mean that this is a genuine like self-inspection, self-reflection, empowering way of taking control and ownership of how you react in situations. We cannot control the situations we're put into. Those situations happen to us. What we can control is how we react in those situations. Okay? So self-awareness is really three parts. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And then how can I choose to act? So we're going to focus today mostly on the what and the why, and I'll have some tips for the how. So there's been lots of additional research into this area of imposter syndrome, and I think the most really hard-hitting one was Dr. Valerie Young's Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. And she proposes there are really 5 archetypes, not just the 2, but 5 archetypes. And these help us give a little bit more nuance into how you're experiencing the world today, what is being the, really largest cause. Maybe you weren't really raised to believe that you were either perfect or just not good enough. There's more nuance to life. And so she breaks down additional types here. And then I've also found additional research to kind of help you understand not just what the types are, but what are steps you can take in the short term and in the long run to help you overcome your specific instinct, right? Your specific type of imposter syndrome. All right, so we're going to go through them one by one, first starting with what they are. How to identify which one of these you are. Now, you may be more than one, but likely you're going to find resonates with you the most. Okay, so first of all, our perfectionists. And I say this with love, but I'm a recovering perfectionist. I grew up in an entire family full of them, so I know this world very, very well. So you know you're a perfectionist when these kinds of statements describe how you think of yourself or your situation. It's just easier if I do it myself. I have high standards, so I know what I'm doing here. Or good is just never good enough. It has to be perfect, otherwise I'm not putting it out the door. The drive to be perfect is actually it's generated by an underlying fear. And that fear is, I'm not cut out for this. Going back to Maya Angelou, I'm not cut out for this. I don't know what I'm doing. They all think I'm not cut out for this, so I better deliver only something absolutely perfect. Otherwise, it's not going to be perceived to be valuable. If it's not perfect, it's a failure. That's a perfectionist. Okay, all right, let's go on to the next one, which is our superhumans. Oh, so many mothers especially feel this way. I don't feel like I'm myself unless I'm stressed out. Free time is a waste. I've got to constantly be doing something. I haven't earned anything at all. I just need to work harder to prove myself. So this underlying fear is really this notion of I'm actually inferior to others. Now, I want to pause on this just to say that women and really all minorities, especially people of color, have this externally communicated to them. People in power tend to communicate to people who are disadvantaged that they are inferior because it maintains a power structure. So I want you to know that I see you, it's not true. And sometimes this inferiority of belief that you are inferior does make you have to work 10 times harder than anyone else. But when it's internally driven, when it's internally created, this internal narrative of you being inferior to others, that's what you can change and what you can control. On the soloists. Now, soloists, I just feel so much empathy for you because I know where this comes from. It comes from this feel that if anyone else gets involved in your work, that somehow or another, that's going to cause you harm. So how do you know if you're a soloist? Team projects suck. I just do all the work anyway, so I might as well just do it by myself. Because, I really don't need anybody else's help because it really is better when it's just me. I perform better when it's just me. So if I control it all, if I just do it myself, that's going to be the best way. You might be a natural genius if your parents always told you were the smart one or the capable one, or everything was perfect, or you always got the best grades, or things just come really easily to you. Or I think most important, this is the most important indicator, you don't like to try new things unless you know you're going to ace them, unless you're going to be perfect out of the gate at it. Like you're going to show up and it's just effortless for you. You won't try anything unless you know you can do well. The underlying fear here is I'm actually just not that talented at all. You're running a game on everybody and they're going to find you out, right? That's the underlying fear. You don't deserve this. You just got lucky, right? Very challenging, particularly if you're not willing to try something new unless you know you can be good. And my experts. All right, women in general only apply for positions that we're qualified for, but experts take that a whole nother step further. They won't even try unless they know that they've got all of the knowledge required, all of the skills required. They have to be the expert in something before they will participate. Different than being effortless, they have to be highly knowledgeable, they have to be highly skilled, and they also have the monkey on their back of, I'll never be good enough. And whew, women, I gotta tell you, that's my monkey. I'll never be good enough. That constant comparison, comparing yourself to everyone else. So experts feel like in order to be top of the pack, they have to be better than everyone because they really believe that they're just not good enough, right? Okay. So I want to encourage you to take just a minute or two and write down which one of the 5 archetypes resonated with you, either the fear that was behind each of them or the statements, what it meant to you, what you think about that as a result, and use a specific example, like, oh, I remember I felt that way when this thing happened. So just take a minute and jot those things down. And while you're doing that, I want to encourage you to just be kind to yourself. Kindness is underrated, I think, sometimes, but most important when we think about the internal dialogue that we're having, the internal dialogue that, these are the words we tell ourselves when something big or small happens, when we're judging ourselves. So I know when I'm in the middle of doing something really important, my inner dialogue is ratcheted up, right? It's constantly critical. It's looking for things to have an opinion about almost, right? And then after the fact, after I've completed whatever it was, then I replay it in my head over and over and over again. And it can be incredibly negative, focused only on the things that went wrong, not on the things that went right. And I will tell you, after 10 years of working with surgeons and 10 additional years of working with sales leaders and sales reps, that even the most confident seeming people are the harshest critics. And I've come to realize that actually that's true of everybody. The harshest critic is always ourself. It's always the internal dialogue. So the next time you are telling yourself that you're a failure, that you suck, that you was completely just a waste of everyone's time or whatever it is, whatever that negative voice inside your head is telling you, to remember you would never say that out loud to somebody you loved. You would never say that to your child or to your parent or to your spouse. You would never say that. So why on earth are you saying it to yourself? Okay, so with all of that in mind, now let's look at what each of these archetypes can do to overcome. So starting with my perfectionists here, okay? First thing, small things, and then the large thing is in bold. So small things, starting with celebrating your achievements. I know this is hard. It's hard because you feel like nothing is worth celebrating unless you were proud of it, and you're not proud of anything unless it was perfect. My friends, I have to tell you, celebrating the small achievements, the things that weren't necessarily perfect but you completed and that were on target, on time, or within the bounds of what was expected, or when you exceeded other people's expectations, you have to celebrate them. Write them down. Talk to other people about them, about what you did. Learn to feel proud about things that were not perfect. Okay, second thing, and this was advice that I got, I think I shared this with you. I'm a recovering perfectionist. One of my favorite and earliest mentors shared this advice with me, and she looked me straight in the eye and she said, Candice, don't let great get in the way of good and done. Whew. People, I gotta tell you, That was really important. What she was telling me was that 90% done was really good and it was done. That extra 10% that would have gotten me to perfect was not nearly as valuable as the time I could be spending on other things. Now, the ultimate goal for perfectionists is actually to embrace your mistakes, my friends. Did you know you can learn more from failure than you can from success? There is a whole set of research about this particular area on grit. Check out Angela Duckworth, and on a growth mindset. So I'm sure you've heard of that term before, growth mindset. Very important for you to get comfortable with discomfort, with imperfect. So embracing your mistakes, of seeing them as opportunities instead of failures, is the ultimate goal for my perfectionists. Next up are superhumans. Okay, so again, if this is internally driven narrative for you, that you have to be constantly moving, overachieving, doing more than anybody else, if this is internally driven, how do you overcome this? Critical step is value praise from others less. External praise, external validation is only actually encouraging you to live in that cycle of doing more, doing more, doing more, doing more. Because at the end of the day, for all of these archetypes, all we're trying to do is get more love. So if you think of you doing more, you're thinking you're going to get more love from people. In fact, what you're teaching others is that you're just going to always do more than anyone else, and they come to expect you to do more, and they value that output less. So it's not actually giving you the results that you want. So learning how to value praise less from others is really challenging. It starts with finding a hobby, finding something that you do that's just for the pure joy of it, not for anyone else. Something where you're not going to ever show anyone, that nobody else gets the chance to judge it. Maybe for you it's baking, or maybe for you it's gardening. Maybe it's, I don't know, playing chess or art, some sort of expression or activity that is just for you and you alone. It doesn't have to be an hour a day. It doesn't have to be every week. It just needs to be consistent. Okay. Your ultimate goal is to create internal validation. So things that you do and you love, and it reinforces your sense of how cool I am. You want to spend more time with yourself. You think I'm amazing. I do what I love to do. I am my most important self when I'm doing this. Internal validation, not external validation. So for soloists, your worth is more than your output. Your worth is you as a person. And stating that worth is actually really challenging. I get it. So showing up with someone you trust. Hopefully that's your boss, maybe it's your peers, but stating what your needs are as a person, not just what the project needs. So if you need more time, or you need more resources, or you need more research, or you need whatever it is, but you have to show up and be able to state those needs. The second thing I want you to do is learn to play as a group. So maybe this is some sort of team sport, like maybe it's, kickball, or maybe it's pub trivia, but something where you're learning to trust the group to play together. But in playtime, where the stakes are lower, then you're more able to do that and to practice that group trust. So trusting others in order for you to feel like you can still achieve and be part of a group achievement instead of a solo achievement. Ultimate goal for soloists is to make space for the unexpected to happen. You're not going to be able to control everything all of the time. And when you make room for that unexpected, you can have unexpectedly beautiful outcomes. For my natural geniuses, it's getting out of this sense of binary world. It's not success or failure. It's not all or nothing. It's not just either you are completely effortless or it's not worth even trying. So in order to get there, got to break down your goals into skills that you can improve step by step. And so going back to this, again, notion that you're not going to try anything unless you know you're going to be perfect at it. You need to start trying things you know you're not going to be perfect at. So embracing that you are not always going to be a natural genius, and showing others that you're not a natural genius. Okay, both of those things are really important for you. You are a work in progress. And then for my experts, you got to embrace the notion that you're never going to know everything. All right, so how do we break this down step by step? First is embrace just-in-time learning. Put yourself in situations where you know you're not an expert and just learn on the fly. I also recommend getting a coach, because coaches can really push you in directions. It helps you learn to be vulnerable and admit when you don't know everything about a topic area. So particularly important to learn from others as much as you're learning from yourself. So it's been my experience that I learn as much from mentoring someone as I do from getting mentored by someone. So that mentor and mentee relationship really interesting, kind of doubles growth on both sides. Now, this final statement, vulnerability is shame's kryptonite, is really true for all 5 of these archetypes, but especially true for experts. And the reason is because experts tend to feel that any weakness, any point of vulnerability is equivalent to absolute failure, right? If I'm not an expert in it, then I'm an absolute failure. And that's where vulnerability needs to become a learned practice. Now, I say it's shame's kryptonite because of research by Brené Brown, but it kind of gets summed up in this one statement. Shame cannot survive being spoken. This is based on the research. It cannot survive empathy. So shame, really manifests in anything that we feel like we failed at. We feel ashamed of something we failed at. Vulnerability requires courage, meaning you have to show up and share your shame with someone. When you share it, when you speak it out loud, and that person on the other end of the line shares empathy with you, meaning, oh, wow, I really understand what you're feeling, or I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. That must be awful. Let's talk about it. What can I do to help you? You're validating that other person's feelings. You may not have experienced exactly the same situation, but maybe you've experienced something like that, or you can imagine it. That is showing empathy. So the reason I give this to you is because what I want you to do is to develop your networks of women and share this with each other. So again, additional research tells us that 77% of high achieving women had strong ties with a female dominated network, at least an inner circle of 2 or 3 women, versus the lowest achieving women have a male dominated network. My recommended follow-up work for you is a practice of self-awareness, sharing, and reinforcing your network of other women. Okay, so pay attention when you're having an imposter moment, when you're feeling like I'm not good enough or I don't deserve this. Pay attention. How are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? And then share it with someone else. Okay, so let's do the why of I was a sweaty, shaken mess. I'm going to take you all the way back to the beginning of this presentation when I shared with you that really important imposter syndrome moment I was having. So I would put myself back into that mindset of, what I was going through at the time and kind of the self-reflection that I had later. So I was such a sweaty, shaky mess because I was so afraid that I was going to completely screw it up, that I was going to show up and not know anything, that they were going to completely reject me, that I was going to be an absolute failure at being able to manage these boot camps. And why was I so certain that that was going to happen? Well, I had never done it before, and I didn't think that anyone that had never done it before should ever be able to do it and do it well. Okay, well, why didn't I trust myself to do it well? Because there was so much more to learn. I was still really new at this, and I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I just didn't have enough time to practice, and it was just going to be insane and crazy. Okay, so why didn't you trust yourself? Well, because this was a really big deal, and people were going to see me. They were going to I couldn't hide. There was nobody else there. It was just me solo in the front of the room. And why was that a problem? Well, because I just didn't think that I was good enough to do this. Why didn't I think I was good enough to do this? I don't know. Because I'm just the social one. I'm not the smart one. So that was kind of how I got there, right? I'm not the smart one. I'm not the capable one. I'm just the social one, right? This may or may not come easily for you. It is, as I said, a practice. It's a methodology. It's not an instantaneous moment where you're just going to have this oh, I get it about everything. But this is a practice in life. And so I really encourage you to call someone to really develop that network. And if you don't have anyone to call, if you don't have anyone to share with, please, by all means, reach out to me if nobody else, right? I'm sure you do, but I'm happy to be that sounding board for you as you're going through managing these moments of feeling like you're not good enough, or that you've got to prove them all right, or you got to prove them all wrong. Thank you so much for your time.